we'll get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the series Mud Talks, Navigating Your Career with Grace Credo, class of 96, Frances Ferris, class of 80, Giselle Galper, parent of a 25 mudder, Aleina Wachtel, class of 16, and moderator Shannon Braun, Director of Career Services. My name is Vanessa Chu, Associate Director in the Office of Alumni and Parent Relations. We thank you for attending today's event. This talk is being recorded and will be distributed after the event. Please feel free to type your questions in the Q&A box and we will try to get through as many as possible. Now, I'm going to turn it over to our speakers to introduce themselves. Everyone, thanks for being here today. We're so excited. Shannon, take it away.
Great. Thanks, Vanessa. As Vanessa said, I'm Shannon. I'm the director of the Office of Career Services, and it's my pleasure to be joined by this esteemed panel. I know we heard your names, but let's put a face to a name and have you introduce yourself, your name, the class or your parent year, and then your current position. So I will start by handing it over to Grace.
Hi, Grace Credo, class of 96, chemistry major. I am currently a technology project program manager at Intel, and I've been at Intel for almost 20 years.
Amazing. Okay. Giselle?
Thanks. I'm Giselle Galper, parent 25 of a graduating senior in math physics, and I'm currently the founder of a tech platform that is helping individuals with their careers and training organizations, helping their alum. And previously, I was a general counsel for 17 years.
Thank you. And Frances?
Frances Ferris, class of 1980, engineering. I'm actually retired. I spent 35 years with Rockwell International and Boeing, with 31 of those years in human spaceflight.
Amazing. And Aleina?
Hi, everyone. My name is Aleina Wachtel, and I'm class of 2016, specifically math major. And I'm a senior product manager at Microsoft, specifically on the Microsoft Word team.
Okay, great. And with those introductions, let's get started with our discussion today. So research has shown that women are hired and promoted based on proven experience, while men get promoted sometimes based on potential. So first of all, let's discuss, have any of you personally experienced this or observed this in your career? And I'll just start with Frances.
Yeah, I've actually had two times when I asked for or expressed interest in a job, did not get it because I didn't have direct experience in that organization. And the jobs went to people who did have the direct experience, although they did not have all the skills needed and obviously didn't perform as well as I believe that I could have.
Any other panelists experience this?
I'm happy to jump in a little bit here. So, I mean, there's definitely the very famous study around how women, when they apply to a job, they feel like they have to have, 100% of the qualifications, and men, maybe they have 50% and they'll try. And so part of it I find when it comes to getting hired is about storytelling. And so, whether or not you have, the experience is something that's very hard to evaluate in an interview context. And what I found that is societally, men have been conditioned or kind of reinforced to be able to tell that story, and to, even if it's like, I don't want to say exaggerating, because I don't think I think it's actually more being able to package yourself and brand yourself correctly so that you're really landing that first impression in the most, highest ceiling, most impressive way that you possibly can. So I think it's a matter of identifying how you can really take as much of your experiences, as much of, what you are capable of, and frame it in the right way so that you're demonstrating the skill set. And I just think on average, men do this more than women. And this is something that we actively have to work on, actively be very intentional about. And it's also just kind of a big club. It's I find, especially with the downturn in the amount of positions that are available in the tech industry right now, most of the time you're going to get hired from someone connecting you or giving you, some sort of referral. And so leveraging that network, and that actually is much more, for me, going to influence the potential positions that you can get than the actual experience you have or the actual experience of the candidates that you might be competing against.
Definitely. And Giselle and Grace, what are some of the consequences for growth in a career if this is actively happening?
So actually I was kind of gonna add to what Aleina was saying, but it applies to that question. I found I sometimes am able to package myself in the right way and I, get the job offer or I'm doing really well in the interview process. But I feel like because I'm not as practiced in doing that work in branding myself and packaging that it takes a lot out of me. I feel like, that introvert who like tries harder to party and then once I do that, I have to kind of go away and recharge, and it takes me longer than someone who has more practice. And so I feel like I don't apply for some jobs because I feel like I'll have to do that more often. So I take myself out of the running, I would say, before I even have to go there.
Right.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm gonna two things. One, I know from talking to recruiters, and these are for lawyer positions, but it holds overall, that women will say when it's a higher level job, so assistant general counsel to general counsel, I could grow into that role. And men say, I've done it. And so my advice there is always to say, I've done it. And a lot of women say, oh, but I haven't really done it. But then you have done the job in a different way. And it's back to what Aleina said, it's that storytelling. It's learning how to you tell the story and like not to be a little crazy or too into AI, but that's something AI is really good at saying, like, I want to show that I've done this job, you know, show here's my experience, show how I have, and then challenge that. But the consequence is the slowness to advance. We know that women are slower to advance to the first rung of the management ladder, and then that impacts things going forward. Especially some careers, if you don't have hockey stick growth early, it's really hard to recapture, and you have to go to another place. And the other thing is, it's just super basic. Like if you have to prove your experience and the other person has potential and you have equal experience, they go up, you're always catching up. You're always behind. And so you're slower. For me, the impact is we don't end up in the senior roles, not only impacting product and engineering and organizational behavior and things like that, but we don't have that clout to help other women behind us when we're slower. So it's a big impact.
Just to add to that, it's absolutely a compounding thing too. Like if we don't negotiate, if we don't get our worth for that first position, not to like give everybody who's attending a ton of stress and pressure around like the very first job, but anytime that kind of starts, it sets your compensation and often title and many things for the years to come. Because once you're at a company, unless you're moving somewhere else laterally or, for somewhere another position, your salary increases usually are a percentage of your previous base. And so if you come in negotiating and I find that actually it was the Office of Career Services that really helped me in being able to successfully negotiate my very first job out of college. And I would have never known to do that as a first generation college student if it hadn't been for MUD and the many women and mentors that I have there and standing on the shoulders of giants, right? Like previous generations teaching us these tools that I never would have been able to do that. My parents straight up told me, "Oh, you can't do that. Like, what if they rescind the offer?" Because they don't have the context of working in that industry. And, it's easy to get into that mindset. But like, if you don't go after those things, if you aren't able to effectively storytell them, there absolutely are consequences in the future for every subsequent role that you get, because you can use previous experience and previous compensation to negotiate the next thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So that kind of leads into our next question. So many women hesitate to talk up their work because they're fearful of being boastful or bragging. So how can we reframe bragging into sort of sharing something more valuable and in changing the context? Have you guys experienced that, or do you have some tools that you've used?
I think
Go to Grace. Yeah.
I think part of it again is like trying to I guess everyone has their own personality. Like it has to feel, in order for you to sustain a career at a certain level or maybe at the pace you want, you have to be true to what your kind of the way you approach things. And so um, I don't mind bragging about myself if I think it's useful for the project. So I try to frame it in that way. It's not about me, it's about the company or the project. It takes away the again, like the immigrant family thing where you're kind of grateful to be there. Like I don't want to just be grateful to be there. I want to actually make a contribution, and I want it to be recognized.
Great. Any thoughts on that, Frances?
Yeah, I think adding on to what Grace said, I think it's really helpful to keep your own record because it's very, very difficult for you to remember, much less your management chain, what you've done. And not just in identifying the task, but identifying what the results are, because that's what they care about. And you can speak to how you help drive those results. And you can use that then when you're talking about your performance within your organization or when you are interviewing for a job. I used to tell people when you interview for a job, answer questions kind of like a politician does. You don't have to answer the direct question they ask you. Use the question to tell them a story that you want them to know about yourself.
Great. Giselle?
Well, absolutely on that. And I think I like to say it's two parts. Like people, when you tell people, you tell them what you know and kind of where you want to go. So to Frances's point, you have to know what you've done. And women are really good at downplaying that. So use your amazing organizational skills that you have for work and keep that list. But then don't keep where you want to go. Your goal's a secret. And when you're thinking like, oh, it's bragging, actually, if you're excited, like I'm doing this project on this team and I love it, and I can't wait to do that on blank. First of all, you're sharing that your skills and in an organization that's super valuable, but also your excitement is contagious. People want to know what you're excited about. So I feel like you're sharing for the good when you tell people what you're doing and that it's not bragging at all. And if you keep it a secret, how will people know what your aspirations are?
Amazing. I love the addition of our future leader leading in, Grace.
I also think there's super important context of like what your company and organizational processes are for doing this. But once you're kind of familiarizing with this, like I think there's a couple of different things that you can do. One, writing things down, like in my world, these are things like celebratory status mails. Like it's really hard to do meta work. It can feel frustrating to have to like write down everything that the team has accomplished and send it out. But like these newsletters, these blog posts, these emails, like whatever it might look like what the equivalent is like actually socializing it is actually super important for closing the loop. So don't just do the work. You actually generally have to do some storytelling, at least in my line of work. And you can make it a collective win. Like it makes you look good, but it also can be like the collective accomplishments of the team because as Mud very effectively teaches us, working in STEM is a very collaborative thing. And so, there aren't just, there's in an interview context, don't say we. You should say, I did this, I did this. But in a professional context and, showing up a workplace when it comes to like you're talking about your accomplishments, you can, leverage the power of the we and amplifying the team. Another interesting thing that I wanted to bring up in terms of like getting that visibility and accomplishments is it's not just what you know, and it's actually not who you know. It's who knows what you know. That was one of my favorite pieces of advice that I ever got from a mentor early in my career. And so I find that my favorite part of the job is actually relationships. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're like the most brilliant person, most competent person. Like if you don't build strong relationships and you're well liked, like at the end of the day, we are humans. We are psychological creatures that ultimately will work more effectively with the people that we like. So if you take the time to get to know a lot of people laterally, get to know your peers, set up a lot of one-on-ones, and then vertically, where you're getting to know your manager, maybe your manager's manager, your organizational leadership, depending on, and then also diagonally, like we call it the aunts and the uncles, the peers of your leaders, or the leaders of the partner teams that you're working with. Investing in those relationships, showing up really well. I love the idea that you lead with warmth and follow through with competence so that you have like this general aura of like, damn, that person, they are so good at what they do and they're a joy to work with. And that just makes you show up very well consistently. And this is how you build something in a scalable way. You don't have to actually articulate and amplify your own accomplishments. You have an army of people who have gotten to know you and have worked with you and have been impressed with your work to do it on your behalf. And that's how you get sponsorship. It's the people who are talking about you when you're not in the room that are talking about, wow, Giselle, she's amazing. Have you had the chance to work with her? Grace, God, I love working with her. She's been such an asset to the project. Have you thought about her for this position? Frances, she's amazing. So you don't even need to do it yourself. You want to try and build this armada of people who can do it on your behalf because you show up really well and you're there to like give that person their kudos as well whenever possible.
Nice. And can any of you, this sounds like such an interview question. Can any of you think about a time where, talking up the work that you've done or the work that your team have done have brought more opportunities to you or have led to promotion or more opportunities for your team? It's such a behavioral interview question. Tell me about a time when.
I'll answer that super quickly. I was a general counsel and I was remote very early, 99 through 2016. And I had to generate my business. We hadn't had a general counsel before I came. And so I had to put out there my wins. And I did that with partnering with my clients. So one thing just to kind of dig deeper into what Aleina said is that it's not only you, when you go out and you talk to those people and you tell them what you do, it is okay to ask them to mention it or to talk you up. That is totally fair game. And that's how I did it in my work. I would say at, next week's team meeting, would you mind mentioning how great it was when we did this? Because they would give me the compliment, but it's when they socialize it that it makes a difference and gives you the opportunity. And sometimes you have to remind people to do that and ask them. And they're happy to do it if you've done good work.
Perfect. Thank you. So I think we've touched a little bit about this concept of networking, and I love the example, Aleina, that you shared of how big the network can be. So can you talk about a time like when networking has played a role in your career growth or like, how to parlay some of your relationships into your next move?
I'm happy to answer that question. So when I first joined Microsoft, I was just looking to get any PM position, like to get a foot in the door. I was cool with whatever. And so they looked at my math background and they were like, awesome, IT network infrastructure. I had no background in that, but like I was going to take whatever was available. And I did learn a lot. That was an amazing experience, but it wasn't like a perfect fit. I really wanted to work on something that was externally facing, that had more of a UI with direct customers, as opposed to working kind of on network services that was internally facing in an IT organization. And the way that I ended up pivoting and getting my first role in like the Microsoft Office product group, which was like literally a completely different part of the company, I actually do a lot of what I'm going to call extracurriculars. And so I was the head of the early in career university hires program for my entire division. And I started, first by volunteering on one of the committees and then working my way up so that I always super cared about getting to do some sort of diversity, equity, inclusion, V teams efforts, something at work. And I've made it very clear to my employers that always some percentage of my allocation for my job is going to be on those efforts because it gives me a lot of energy, which is why I love, being here today on this panel. And I was actually lamenting to someone who was super high up that was like on one of the V teams with me. We weren't even on the same team around how like I really don't want to leave Microsoft. I feel like I haven't gotten to do exactly what I wanted to do and this team isn't like a perfect fit for me. So she said, why don't you give me your resume and I'll give it to the chief of staff of office. And so I gave her my resume. She socialized it with the chief of staff, who then socialized it with all of the hiring managers across that entire division. And then my eventual later boss's boss reached out to me and I was like, hey, are you still looking? So I never even officially applied to that position. It was just from like my extracurricular, had nothing to do with my job. It's something I love to do that would allow me to interface with a ton of people that I never would have interacted with that helped me get that job. And the way that I'm now on the Word team, I also didn't have to apply. I was in my women's mentoring circle and we had a guest speaker come in He happened to be the head of product for Word. He was talking about best practices for product management. I raised my hand. I asked some good questions because I'm a yapper. I like to ask a lot of questions, and asked if I could set up a coffee chat with him to continue our conversation. We ended up getting into like a one-on-one mentoring thing over time. And eventually I started talking to him about how I wanted to move to a team that had more UI front end. He was like, well, my team is hiring. And because we had like organically created this relationship where he was my mentor, I was able to change and move internally to a totally different part of the company once again. So it has never been from going onto the company portal and saying, hey, for this years of experience and this job title, what is available? Absolutely not. The way that it works is you get to know people, and then they know people who could then make introductions. And that has only gotten more the case with the tech industry than it was when I first did this, entering 8 years ago.
Excellent.
And just to add on to what Aleina just said, I think you do that within your organization, and you can do that outside your organization, whether it's a professional organization or some other group. And the more people you talk with and let them know what you're interested in and what you want to do, the more chances you have of getting an opportunity. And another thing that she said, talking about having a mentor, is we get stuck very often in this idea that you need to enter your company's mentorship program, but most mentorships are informal. It's just you build a relationship with someone. You don't even have to use the words mentor and mentee. It's somebody you can talk with openly and freely about where you are, what you need, what you want.
So I
Great.
wanted to add to that. So yeah, the term that I like is advocate. Like through all these interactions I have people who know about me and can speak about me, and not I don't even really have to work with them. Like in the time I've been at my company, every 4 or 5 years, I actually have to interview internally because there's some major reorg, and I have to figure out what group I can land in. And so each time I do that, I build up a network of people because I end up sending my resume all over the place. And even if it's people I don't know directly, it's, acquaintances of acquaintances. They'll remember something technical from my resume, and they'll be able to direct me to somebody else. And so the position I have now, my group was closing. And so I ended up getting it's called sabbatical coverage. Somebody was going away for 3 months and they needed somebody to cover a position. And that was a technical assistant and a business operations manager. And my previous title was research scientist. And so it was work I was already doing in my old group, but it was the direction I wanted to go in to get out of lab. And so I took that 3 month opportunity, and then I was able to leverage that into applying to a position that was opening in my current company. And so I was able to make the leap I wanted to, but I had to take a little step in between and kind of be open to, I know this is only 3 months, but this is exactly the job title I'm looking for. So I want to go there. And then from there, I can apply more easily to these internal positions with the job title I'm looking for.
Thanks.
I just want to go off on what Frances said a little bit. A lot of times women, we don't, and there's a lot of research around this, we don't spend enough time in industry events and getting involved in the industry, or possibly with our suppliers or partners who have a lot of influence over the decision makers in our companies. It's really worth it to take that time in your career and do that. It's absolutely important, like Aleina and Grace said, to also have those people internally. But these relationships, even if they're just 15-minute sessions, a lot, that you have with people, either remote or having coffee in person, learning about what they've done, knowing what you're interested in, that's huge. But if you can do that in your industry, you can volunteer in some kind of leadership position or panels. That gives you visibility that can give you stature in your organization. It can also give you options if your organization or things are shifting. And I think as we go into this next phase of our economy, whatever it might be, that it's even more important that you have a bigger network and you're talking to people.
Yeah, I so agree. And I think oftentimes, and I know I'm working with the current students, that networking is sort of like it's a long game, and sometimes you have this short-minded, I need something now, I need something now, but knowing that, some of these conversations are learning opportunities, and it might not pay back for years to come, and knowing that you need to build the network for the long game is kind of a good message to share with some of our newer students that are coming out of MUD. So
just one more thing, if I can,
yeah,
Shannon.
sure.
I think too often we assume that our manager knows what we want or what our next step is going to be. And I would say most managers really aren't thinking about individuals' career development. And they're not going to know unless you tell them. And so you do have to, we've said this repeatedly already, you have to advocate for yourself. You have to tell people what your interests are and what you're interested in doing, because they don't know.
It's true. And you actually teed up our next question. So if you have more to add, feel free. So women are often taught to work hard and wait rather than ask for opportunities. So why do women hesitate to ask for raises, promotions, and leadership roles? And how do you think this can best be navigated?
I think it's a cultural thing. We're kind of brought up that way. I mean, girls and boys are raised differently, and that's why you have to speak up for what you want. I had one point in my career where I felt a little pigeonholed, and there was an opportunity that came up in the same organization that I was in, but at a director level. And I went and told my boss he was actually leaving, and I wanted his job. I didn't think I had any chance of getting his job. But part of the reason I went, and I actually thought I could have, but part of the reason I talked to him was to make the point that I don't want to just sit here doing what I'm doing for the next 10 or 20 years. And he basically told me I wouldn't be interviewed for that position. But within the next 6 months or so, I was put on a proposal as a temporary assignment because we were restructuring our contract. And as a result of that proposal effort and the contacts I made there, I ended up with a program management position, which I don't think I would have been considered for if I hadn't made that ask to begin with.
Perfect.
In terms of why women might not be empowered to do it, I think some of the societal conditioning has improved. Like, I'm so lucky and grateful, and I think probably the female students who are in MUD today have also even gotten more of that, like advocating for yourself throughout so much of their lives at this point. But that doesn't mean that there aren't penalties that are, disproportionately negative for women when actually advocating for yourself, because there's an expectation around kind of being like peacemaking and the bitch versus the boss, basically. And so having to navigate doing it in such a way that won't penalize you is, I think it's not necessarily that especially young women are not doing it as much, because now we've been told like, hey, you don't do this enough, so go do it. So now we're doing it, but then like having to navigate through the political waters of how to do it properly. So my recommendation to answer like, well, how do I go about doing it and what have I seen is really effective, is you shouldn't be asking first and foremost. I don't go to my manager and sit down and be like, can I please have a promotion? Like, that's not the way I structure the conversation. It's more, you find whatever documentation exists. Ideally, hopefully there's something where you can kind of craft something together of what are the roles and responsibilities of your profession. And then you're going to get up 3 highlighters, okay? The green ones, you're going to highlight all the bullets. I'm doing this already. And here's examples. The yellows are, okay, I don't really have the opportunity to do this. It's not a matter of me not doing it. It's just like the nature of my projects don't really allow me to demonstrate that particular set of skills. And then the red marker or orange or whatever, contrast ratio color you can actually read. That's going to be the things I could be doing, but I like, these are opportunity areas for me. And I want to get better at these things. And, you'll bring that list to your manager, and you're in the driver's seat of your career, right? No one else is going to do this for you. So you craft exactly what you're doing well and what you want to get better at. And then you'll say, do you agree with this list? Now we're going to edit it together, and we're going to make sure that we all think the greens are green. Oh, maybe some of these yellows are actually green, and the reds, maybe those are yellows. And then you land on that list. And then you have a very concrete list that you can just turn that grid green. And you could be like, all right, I'm doing all these things. I'm already operating at this level. Can you help me understand the pathway for the next level of advancement? So it's not asking for a promotion. It's demonstrating I'm already operating at this level. And what are the things that I need and the things that coaching that you can provide me, the opportunities and projects that you can grant me so that I can be operating at the next level. And at that point, I just want to be paid what is the level of work that I'm already operating at. And that's the way that you navigate the conversation. Don't make it about money and don't make it about like, please give me something. It's here's the value that I'm bringing and here are the specifics of exactly as it aligns to what my responsibilities are, and then just paying me accordingly.
Great advice.
So I think it's a little different in different organizations. I know for sure that Aleina's right in many companies. Other companies, there might need to be an ask, but I would say it's a little bit like the talking yourself up or the socializing it with other people, so that people are going around and saying, Francis would be an amazing VP of whatever. And when that happens, when your boss hears that, when other people are talking you up, endorsing you, that's one way where you're not asking. It's also figuring out, and I think, Aleina, you said this kind of in the subtext of what you're saying, where's your alignment of what's important with your manager? And that's super important. That's important for your performance reviews and for getting whatever it is you need, because understanding what's important to them for their job to be successful might not be your to-do list, but that is kind of how they evaluate you at a gut level. Some organizations, you might need to say, like, I very much want to, sort of that same excited thing. I'm really excited about one day being I don't know what it is, senior product manager or something like that. And just putting it out there and saying, even without your list that you thought about, what would I have done over the next 6 months? What do you feel I would have done if I'm ready for that job? And so you can ask the question in that way. So you really have to feel out your organization, talk to people who have been promoted, ask them what they did, because there's going to be some type of playbook that's appropriate for your company, small or large, and your manager specifically. So sometimes managers aren't that easy to promote. And then, so don't be afraid to do what Grace did, which is take a position that, I don't know if that was lateral or over,
It's
but
lateral,
like,
yeah.
yeah, take a lateral position to get out of a manager or a situation that isn't good to get promoted, because sometimes you're just stuck.
I also wanted to emphasize I guess, I've been in the career for a while, so it's not necessarily the promotion or the job title. Sometimes, like at least in my last job search, I prioritize what I wanted my day-to-day life to be like. And so, since COVID, I've been working remotely. I kind of wanted to be able to stay in that route. And I also wanted to be customer facing a little more than I was, and I didn't have a way to control that exactly. But as I talked to hiring managers and other people, they were able to recommend to me, well, if that's what you want, these are the job titles you should go after, or these are the people you should have informational chats with. So um, trying to sometimes it's not clear to me, but if I talk to other people and I know what to ask for, or I figure out what to ask for, then it's more clear. And I am able to communicate that that's my top priority. Like I want these three things. I don't necessarily care about, the promotion. It's just, I want to be able to do not just these things at work, but I need to allow for some flexibility in my, my life and taking care of my kid. And so that's what I want to prioritize at this point.
Great. So let's envision a scenario where you've done all the things. You're talking yourself up. You're showing, the work that you're doing. You're highlighting areas that you're reaching beyond what your current job description calls for. But then you're still hitting a roadblock or a pushback to what you feel is a rightful next step for your career. What are some strategies that we can use to kind of push through those roadblocks or still push forward in those instances?
So I think a lot of people, so it's very rare actually that the people I started working with at my company, I think I'm the survivor out of the 40 of us who started in the group I was in. And I think some people or a lot more people are willing to move to another company. So maybe you need to change where you are or who your manager is. So the way you assess that is you have to talk to other people in other groups and figure out if that is actually um, the view. What is the view outside your group? Because if things aren't happening in your group, like is it you and do you fit there anymore, or do you think somebody is maybe holding you back because they have a way of looking at you, a pigeonholing you that you don't think is the right way to approach your career. So I think you need to get outside of your area and take a look at what's happening at another level.
I want to build off of what a few folks have mentioned, especially Grace, around like optimizing for your happiness and how that's a broader question than just title and pay. So you're getting pushback, you're asking for these things, and I think we, as including the panelists and attendees and the future recording watchers, are ambitious women who have, very specific career goals that we want to attain. But I have found that there's, at least for me, like after accumulating this from many women and many mentors over the years, like kind of a framework for picking jobs and how to balance it against like other things in life. And so it's 5 buckets. One is like the actual roles and responsibilities, like what does the day-to-day look like? Is that something you're interested in? Is that the right type of job? The next is your manager. They get their own bucket because they have so much influence over your projects and your happiness and what your day might actually look like. The culture of the organization, their commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, their representation, the work-life balance, the remote policies, a lot of different things that can totally change what it feels like to be at that company. The fourth is, am I learning? Am I growing? And is there a runway for advancement? Like, are there complex problems that I'm solving and am I being challenged? And the last one, not necessarily in this order, is benefits and compensation. And so then you kind of have to figure out for yourself, what is my personal stack ranking of these different buckets? And you're going to go through different phases of your life where you're going to be able to index on some of these at some times. Like right now, I'm pre-kids. So I've kind of even communicated. I just got married, actually, this past fall.
Congrats.
Thank you. And I've literally told my manager, like, I do want to have kids. I'm comfortable talking to her about that. But I think I'm on the time scale of maybe a few years. So like I'm kind of put the foot on the gas a little bit and I want to take on more because I know that I'm going to be in a place where I'm going to want to have slightly different priorities. And so that is important to me and fine for kind of finding the balance. But to be honest, after Mud, which was probably to date the hardest thing that I've ever had to do. It is by far way harder than anything I've ever had to do at Microsoft. It's not even close. I wasn't willing to put in 60, 70, 80, 90, whatever hours of work into a week. It was not good for my mental health. It was not good for my physical well-being. I was not my happiest, healthiest self at Mud. I'm so grateful for everything Mud gave me and taught me and made me to who I am today. But I would not have the opportunities that I've had in my career, especially as a first generation Latina, like in tech, if it hadn't been for Mud. But I knew to prioritize that like work-life balance was always going to be important. I was never going to work for a grind company where I was going to have to like put in an insane number of hours, even if I was going to make more money. So I think taking a step back before this question of like pushing back when you're asking for more, like, well, what does more mean to you? Like, what do you want? More flexibility? Do you want, more money? Do you want, what is it? And then figuring out if you're not getting that, whatever that more is in that right bucket, that's when you have to definitely investigate like moving to a different team if you want to stay at the same company. That's what I've done because I don't know, the benefits and the work-life balance of Microsoft are pretty good. So I even though that I know logically I would definitely make a lot more money if I moved to a different company. That's the single best way to make more compensation is like actually company hopping. But there's a lot of like quality of life things that I'm not willing to negotiate. So internals made sense for me. But if there's different priorities for your stack ranking, then you should go to different places and that it will help you achieve the more that you're asking for.
Great. Any more work-life balance comments? Actually, we had a couple pre-submitted questions, and I do want to encourage the audience, if you have questions for this panel, please type them into the chat. We want to get to your questions. And the two that were submitted were work-life balance. So any more on that topic?
Hey, Shannon.
Mhm.
I would like to say one more thing on not getting what you want,
Okay,
because
sure.
I have advised people with that. And it did also happen to me, which is how I ended up researching a lot with this. You really have to treat yourself like your own client when that happens and figure out with your manager in the organization how to put them into a box. A lot of people get told, now is not the time, especially in small, medium businesses. In a large organization like an Intel or a Microsoft, the talent department is going to have a lot more say about what the time is in your organization. But it's not the time now. We don't have the budget, or later. And so it's your job to keep that discussion door open and kind of squeeze down the alternatives. And maybe you do have to leave, as either Grace or Aleina said. At some point, people come to the decision where that's not going to happen with that manager. And then I listened to a talk, I can't remember the woman's name. She was at Microsoft, and she talks about how she navigated laterally and up. She became very senior at the end through her career, and she was like there over 30 years. And that's also okay. When you get told no enough times in enough way, I'd say it's three, if you've asked different ways and you've waited, if you've done it three times and the answer is no, you have to realize the answer is no. And your boss might not be honest about what happened. And I think, Grace, you alluded to that, like maybe someone isn't as a sponsor or supporter of you. Maybe someone doesn't think you're doing your job as well as you are. And the last piece of that is just ask. Don't be afraid to ask for actionable feedback, to be really specific about, um, what do you specifically think? What action or alternative advice could you give me that could be different? Like, what did you see? Because people might not be open to telling you. As women, we get less actionable feedback. And then if you're getting no, my guess is you're not hearing something, like something's being hidden from you. And so you have to be brave enough to peel back that onion and find out what's going on.
Great, good feedback. So I'll toggle to one of these pre-submitted questions, and then I see one in the chat that we'll get to as well. So both of them are in the vein of work-life balance. So how do you handle societal pressure of being a parent caretaker, or prioritizing your career and your ascension in your career? So any more comments on that kind of societal pressure of being a parent or a caretaker and being the best you can in your career?
So I would say one of the things that I think happens when you become a mom is you become much more efficient at work because you know that you want to leave at a certain time. And at least in my personal experience, as long as I've done my work and I don't leave any loose ends at the end of the day, it's fine. I never had any issues with the fact that I was working fewer hours than I used to. And I'll just tell a little story. I at one point in time, my boys were playing Little League baseball, and I would just leave at 4:30. And if they had an early game, I would get there halfway through. And one summer I decided, oh, the heck with that. I'm going to leave at 2:30 if they have an early game. And the first time I did that, I got there at the beginning of my son's game, and early in the game, he participated in a triple play. And I thought, I never would have seen that if I had stayed at work.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think as long as you perform and your management knows what your situation is, you can make it work. And if they're not open to that, then it may be the wrong organization for you.
Any other thoughts from the panel on the whole work-life balance and the challenges of doing both?
Yeah, I think it is important to communicate what your boundaries are. Like, I want to leave by this time. So if you want something from me, you need to tell me, many hours before. I'm not going to be able to do that between 2 and 5. So I think I feel a lot more comfortable doing that now. But early in my career, I just kind of, did everything and, just tried to pile on as much as I could. But now I have to think about whether it is something that is going to impact the other stuff I want to do besides work. So I'm very open about my calendar. Like, if it says out of office, I'm out of office. You can contact me, but the thing's not going to get done in that window.
Great. Thank you. So the question in the chat has to do with
really quickly, I'm so sorry.
go ahead.
I do want to say one last thing about work-life balance. It's a counterintuitive piece of advice, which is why I like to bring it up. Especially if you're talking about future parenting, which there are some folks who do plan to do by themselves. But speaking for, if you do plan to have a partner in life that will help you along with that journey, I remember going to a women's conference a few years back, and it's always stuck in my brain. One of the most important decisions you can ever make for your career is who you pick as a life partner. Who you marry, if that's something that you want to do. If you don't want to get married, that's all totally cool too. But like, I have found it to be absolutely imperative for optimizing for my life goals that my husband is a feminist and my husband is damn good at cleaning and cooking and being involved in what domestic labor and adulting requires so that I'm able to continue to do the things that are important to me. And that'll only become a trillion times harder and more important if and when we choose to have children. And so that's kind of a curveball piece of advice, but like that's something that I think I've really thought deeply about of like kind of the life that I want to build. Because if you don't have someone who can like you're both putting in 100% and pick up the slack or be doing things in both realms, it's going to be a lot harder to try and do it all because actually nobody can do it all. And so if you have the luxury of having another person at home that you want to try and build that life around, I found that having someone who, if I make more money than him, he's like, hell yeah, that's like more money for us. Like, that's awesome. And two, like, has no weird issues with his masculinity that he like can't constantly do all the dishes or be an amazing cat dad and pick up all the stuff that he needs to, and I don't have to ask him, and it just like that is something that has made my life and my career goals a lot easier because I have somebody behind me, and same thing with me for him, that can make that balance much more achievable. So be very intentional with who you choose to spend your time with, because that's going to make life a lot harder or easier, I think.
Okay, I'm going to go. It's a little different. So I'm 59. I have three kids, 20, 23, 25, and I worked my whole career. And my husband was a tech founder. He had 6 companies. And I think he'd agree with this. We actually talked about it the other day. What percent did he do? And I think he said 10%. And I would have said 20. But we had enough money and we spent against the problem. And I would say not everyone is that lucky or chooses for that reason. And at some point in my career, while I was already a mom and I was already doing a lot of this, but someone told me about a division of duty chart. And it's like, put down all the duties, and often the man doesn't even know what they are in the house, and don't worry about that. So you get all the duties in the spreadsheet, and then you each say, what will I take that I want to do? And then what would I tolerate doing? And then what can we let go? And then what money is there to solve the rest? And that is a little bit ugly to the feminist in me and might not be great for the younger women on this call. But I had a boss who told me if there's a problem money can solve, it's not a problem. And I have lived my life like that. Now, we got really lucky. My husband's last company sold, gave me a lot of freedom to be a founder, freedom to do lots of things. Maybe we didn't save as much because we were focused on revenue generation and getting through. But it is kind of practical. A lot of women might stop out of work or go part-time because they think they can't do it all. Like if they don't have a partner like Aleina's, it can be very hard. And I would encourage you, spend, because I was making very little when we first started spending and having kids. And by the time we were done, I was making 16 or 17 times more. And had I not spent that money, that never would have happened. So I just really encourage you to think boldly about your division of labor.
Great feedback from both your perspectives. Let's get to a couple of these from the chat. I'm going to try to paraphrase the first question, and I hope I get it correct. It's a concern about does the panelist feel like women in high positions are at risk for being let go or scapegoated due to some ideas that they might be more of like a diversity hire. They got to that role for a different perspective, for a different reason, and therefore are more at risk for being blamed or let go. Have you seen that in your history? We've had some recent, kind of university presidents that have been let go over protests. Anything that you've can call on from your experience, or do you feel yourself concerned moving up into an area and feeling more at risk due to your gender?
So Shannon, I would say I haven't seen that either for myself or within the company that I worked for. But one thing that I did notice in my own experience is if I had the same job title or responsibility as a man, people would just assume he deserved it because he had it. But they didn't always assume that I deserved it because I had it. I got tested a bit. And there's that bias, whether it's conscious or not or unconscious, is there. It's real.
100%. I think there was someone who told me to my face when I was at Mud. I think it was like a high school student who was visiting during like ASP weekend. So very ballsy of him to say this. But the reason that I had gone into Mud is because I was female and Hispanic. And then when I was at Microsoft, there was a Microsoft male employee who said to my face, "Oh, well, the only reason you were able to negotiate is because you're Hispanic and female." Instead of, like all of the sacrifices and work that I've done for like my entire life. So like that bias absolutely exists. People will think like, maybe you don't deserve. In terms of the question though of are you more at risk? I think with the examples that you've brought up specifically with the university president, you've got this like external optics thing that is unique to that situation. So what I mean by that is like that's in the news. You have the masses of Twitter and social media and like just a lot of bigotry that exists in the universe that probably compounds that problem. I have found in my own lived experience, luckily, while there's the bias that people are less competent, I don't think women are specifically, at least in what I've personally witnessed, like more at target for getting let go. I think in general, when you get to super, super high positions of leadership, you are actually becoming in like a place of more risk because you are more accountable for business impact and a lot of things that if they don't happen, like at the end of the day, the buck kind of stops with you. So like that gets harder kind of regardless of your gender. But I haven't seen like specifically people of color or women in positions of leadership like becoming scapegoated more. Unless again you got to the situation where the media or like the masses get to have some sort of opinion on it as opposed to like your own organization.
Okay. Amazing. And one more question before we have to close out. Have you noticed that a grad degree or a PhD has been necessary to move up? What are your thoughts about advanced degrees when it comes to career advancement?
So I have a PhD. I don't think it helped my advancement. I think exactly. Where I work, there are a lot of engineers, and not, you don't have to have a PhD to be very successful as either a manager or an individual contributor. So just like side by side looking at that, like I'd say if I compare myself to that, then it looks like my career was slower because I spent more time at school and they had those years of work experience. But I wasn't an engineer. I came through chemistry, and so my interests are slightly different. And what I wanted to do at the beginning of my career is a little different than what I'm doing now. So for me, it worked out. So you kind of have to think about what do you want out of your academics or your career. Like I'm glad I had the experience. I loved being in grad school. That was UC Santa Barbara. I met my husband there. Like as far as my career, I think it might have hurt me, but I'm very happy with where I ended up.
I'm of this very strong perspective to build off of what Grace has said is if you want to get a PhD and go into academia, then you should absolutely do that because we need more women in those fields. But if you think it is a mechanism for negotiating or getting higher pay, absolutely do not go to grad school. It is not the thing that will ever, like, I think I was able to negotiate my offer because I did a 4+1 program. So I got my master's at CGU just by sticking around an extra year. And that was so I could like figure out my life because I thought I was going to get a PhD and I had plans to go into academia. And then I realized actually I want to go into industry. So once you realize you want to go into industry, there is no need to get a PhD unless you're like in a research position within industry. So if you want to go into software engineering or product management specifically, I'll let the other wonderful panelists speak to other professions. There is no need. In fact, the opportunity cost of being in grad school for 5 to 6 years is like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of salary that you didn't make those years, plus the costs associated with that. So like I definitely wouldn't recommend it from a financial perspective, but that doesn't mean that you can't have this beautiful career that takes you through a variety of, I know people who kind of bounce between academia and industry, and this is like the thing that brings them joy and passion, and you should absolutely go do that. But no, don't get a grad degree for like helping with your career advancement. I don't think that that would be the right approach.
Okay. Any other thoughts on this before we close out? Okay. Well, I'd like to thank this amazing panel. It was a really rich discussion, and I'd like to encourage all of our audience members to take one small but powerful step this week, whether it's writing down an accomplishment, reaching out to a mentor, or having a great career conversation. Take the time to take that step this week, and thank you all for joining us tonight. Back to you, Vanessa.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank all of our speakers and our moderator for joining us today, for sharing your knowledge and your insights with us. I mean, wow, what amazing conversation. Thank you to our audience for your questions and for attending this event. We will follow up within the next week with a recorded video. If you are interested in being a Mud Talk speaker or have a topic in mind, please contact us at alumni@hmc.edu. All future events can be found on our website, alumni.hmc.edu. Have a great night, everyone, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for attending.
So, Vanessa, this is Frances. I don't know if you have time for one quick additional
absolutely.
thing.
Yeah,
I just wanted to, I wanted to bring up a quote from Jessica Campbell, who is the first woman assistant coach in the National Hockey League. And she said recently, "My difference is my strength." And we've talked a lot today about a lot of the negatives of being a woman in the workforce, but there are also positives. We have skills often referred to as soft skills, much better than a lot of men do, especially men in STEM fields. And another thing for the really young people that may be on this webinar is because there are so few of us, we get noticed more easily and remembered more easily. And so you should take advantage of that. Take that opportunity and always show your best self. That's it. Thank you.
Excellent.
Great way to
Yeah.
Any other last remarks and comments from our panelists?
Is there a way that we can get connected with the folks that are, currently on? Like I've got time to answer more questions, but I also don't want to hold Vanessa and Shannon hostage. So like if there's an opportunity to answer more questions, like whether that's, connect with us on LinkedIn or send us a bunch of questions asynchronously or like whatever that looks like, I feel like this conversation happens like in the blink of an eye and we could say so much more. So I just want to extend the invite at least for reaching out to me.
Yes, absolutely. So in the follow-up email, we will include your contact information if you'd like to include it. And so folks can find you to, talk more, meet up, and ask you any questions.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Well, everyone, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time. We may actually have another panel like this, so stay tuned. Thank you, everyone.